Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Leslie Choyce. We're here in the Rare Book Room at Mount St. Vincent University today, and my very special guest is Frank McCourt. He's the author of Angela's Ashes, Tis, and a new book called Teacher Man, also a winner of a Pulitzer Prize. Welcome to the show.
Well, Leslie, thank you.
Good to have you here. Now, Teacher Man is about your time teaching in the New York public school system, and there's many stories to tell. A lot of them are packed into the book, but I want to know first, what kind of a student were you back in Ireland?
Terrified. That's what kind of it. I wasn't a student at all. I only went to 8th grade in Limerick. I never went to high school or anything like that. But we went to school in a state of terror. And the more I think about it, and the more I talk about it, I don't know how we got through. It was really, it was damaging. And I think years later, I'm thinking about this, about that school and how it was, well, first of all, it was dominated by the church. Even though the Irish Constitution separates, provides for no official religion, they taught the catechism, Catholicism in the schools. And so we were imbued with a strong sense of sin, a powerful sense of sin. And in addition to that, the method of teaching was brutal. They taught with a stick, a strap, a cane, and bullied us and humiliated us. For instance, if you missed an answer in the catechism, if you didn't know the 7th commandment or the 7 deadly sin or something like that, you were brought up to the front of the room and you lifted up like this by the teacher. That's how they taught.
Now, you had a lot of bad teachers, I'm assuming. You're suggesting?
Well, most of them, except for one man who once encouraged us. All the teachers were brutal. I don't know if you can blame them, if you can blame anybody, if you can, because it was Victorian. Really, I grew up in a Victorian society in its Puritanism and hypocrisy and everything else, with the added ingredient of Irish nationalism and the victim mentality of how we've been victimized by the English for 800 years. These are all the ingredients. But there was I don't remember, and it's only recently I started thinking about this, I can't remember a single moment when there was laughter in the classroom.
Oh, that's sad. Was there
not one?
Was there any teacher who was just absolutely the worst?
Yeah, there was one teacher, this one who used to lift us up like this. We called him Puddley O'D. And he was vicious and obsessed with Irish, the Irish language. If he had his way, he would have spoken nothing but Irish in the classroom, but he had to teach geography and arithmetic and so on. He started us in algebra. And I know there are teachers who teach algebra through the medium of Irish, but he was particularly brutal. And if you missed an answer, so except one time, there was a moment of humanity. Some of the kids, maybe there were 35 or 40 kids in the class. Some of the kids during the winter time would come in barefoot. They simply had no shoes, and there were radiators in the classroom. And I remember one day he allowed them to stand near the radiators to warm up their feet, because you get something between your toes and your fingers called chilblains, and these would fester and turn raw. But that was the one moment I saw of humanity I saw in all of those teachers, except for the last one that I had, whose name was Hoppy O'Halloran, and he was the one who told us to leave Ireland.
Why did you want to be a teacher?
I think I couldn't see myself in a corporate environment doing anything else. I suppose the ideal life for me would have been the life of the writer. But I didn't know anything. I didn't understand anything about writing or life or anything else. Because in a sense, and I know this is a dangerous word, in a sense I was retarded. Really retarded emotionally, psychologically, spiritual, in every other way. So, and colleagues, contemporaries of mine in New York, like journalists like Pete Hamill and Jimmy Breslin, they grew up in the same, they grew up in New York, but in New York or in this continent in general, there's more of a sense of freedom to do what you want to do, as I said, to discover yourself, to define yourself. We didn't have that in Ireland. So when I arrived in New York, I was 19, I had to find myself, and that was my journey in America.
You discovered early on that telling stories, even those stories about your youth in Ireland, really worked, but it sounds like your administrators there didn't want you to do it.
No, you're supposed to adhere to the course of study. All these people make up courses of study in various education headquarters. These are people who don't don't want to have anything to do with teaching. They make up the courses of study and deliver them to the teachers, and it's a kind of instrument of torture. But I always had this image in my mind that I love of Socrates sitting under a tree in Athens of bygone days, talking with the young men of Athens, and that for me would have been the ideal classroom. Socrates had no course of study. Jesus had no course of study. They were the great teachers, and I better say Muhammad. He was a great teacher too. But
well, now we have the great god of curriculum.
Yeah, the great god of the curriculum. Yeah.
What stories did your students like most? Because obviously you got off the track and told those stories.
There was one in particular they used to like. How I got my fare to America, when I was a kid delivering telegrams in Limerick. I delivered a telegram to a woman, and she and I'd skip a lot of it. She hired me. She was a money lender. She hired me to write threatening letters to her customers.
You wrote about this in Angela's Ashes, didn't you?
Yeah, and to these customers who won't pay. And she would give me a certain amount of money to write the letter, and then double it if the letter produced results. She also gave me money for stamps to mail these letters, and instead of mailing them, I delivered them. I stuck them on the doors, hoping I wouldn't be shot. And then she died, and she died by her fireside. And I went upstairs. I knew she had a trunk under her bed, and I helped myself to the money, 55 pounds or whatever it was that would bring me to America. Well, the kids loved this. You did that. The woman was dead. You robbed her, and I took money out of her purse too. They loved the idea of having a criminal, a petty criminal, in front of the ground. And that was they would tell their friends about this. The next year, a new group would come in. Tell us about how you stole the money from the dead woman. So this, and the more I told the story, the more it became refined. So by the time I wrote it, it was done. It was done in my head.
Interesting. But that's got to be a really tough audience. The vocational high school there in New York City, where you're starting out.
Just imagine what it's like to stand in front of kids who don't want to be in your class. They're auto mechanics, they're plumbers, they're machine shop, and so on, and you have to engage them. And the teenagers are always up to something, but you have to do something to get their attention. And many teachers resort to threats. You better sit down or I'll fail you, and all, and they give them little demerits. And I can't give myself any great credit for having been a dynamic teacher. What saved me was my accent. And they were interested in my accent. And they'd ask me about growing up in Ireland, and I would tell them this. If I hadn't had an accent, I think I would never have been a teacher. I would have never lasted in the school system.
So the very thing that was sometimes a problem for you when you first came to America became your asset.
Oh yeah. It was the bridge that I met them halfway across the bridge of the accent. So and I'm afraid maybe I made use of it after a while, reluctantly, because I wanted to be an orthodox teacher. I wanted to stand up there and go on and be able to parse sentences and so on. But I didn't. I was led astray by the kids. It's their fault.
But
they corrupted me.
Well, and they did the very first day, didn't they? The problem over the sandwich.
Yeah. Well, a kid threw a sandwich and I ate it. It landed on the floor in front of me, so I just ate it. That got me into trouble with the principal. Many things got me into trouble with the principal, but I think he knew that I was confused, I was bewildered, and they gave me a break too.
But it's a great job, they say, because you get all that time off.
Oh no, don't talk to me about the time off teachers have. You don't get any time off. For instance, especially maybe in the first 15 years, maybe later on it becomes easier, but you don't. The salary was miserly. We all had to work night jobs. Somebody teaches the night schools in various cities, evening high schools and so on, tutoring schools, and then the summer comes. Somebody has to run the summer schools because they have summer schools in every city. So we had to work. We had to work maybe. School, our regular year would end on the 30th of June. We'd start working in the high schools on the 5th of July after the 4th. So there was really no time off. In addition to taking papers home, I could go on and on about that. If you have 150 or 175 kids and you assign them a composition and you have to take it home and grade it. There goes your weekend.
Now, this is why your students were saying you try to get the teachers that are married and with kids.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to give out a lot of work.
Yeah,
They've got
they had
the
it
other
all.
leg.
That's a very good point, because they had it all figured out. The kids were brilliant in knowing the ritual procedures and so on, and being able to figure teachers out. If you have a teacher who's a married woman or a married man, their evaluations and the grades are going to be much more, what we say, mellow, compared to the single woman is the one you have to watch out for.
Worst, huh?
She's at home, and she's lonely, and she's going to pay more attention to your papers, and she's going to check all the little spelling errors and the punctuation and so on, and she'll put maybe longer comments. So the kids, they used to jostle, because they used to hear them, because there was something called the program office, where we have one teacher making up all the programs, but then he had assistants, and all his little assistants would change the programs. You don't want Miss Boyle. Oh no, she grades the homework. So they created their own programs on based on what they knew about teachers and their expertise.
Well, now, but you had lots of help, because you went to New York University and you had all those education professors that had you very well prepared for your job.
No, the education professors knew nothing.
No.
No, that's why they're education professors. They won't go near, they don't want to go near teenagers. It's all right to get up there and blather on about various theories of education, John Dewey and Summerhill and Montessori and the rest of it, but they don't want to be in the classroom, because that requires being on your toes from 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're not teaching. I used to envy these teachers. Why the hell didn't I become a university professor? Because you teach about 3 or 4 classes a week, and that's it. And then you have consultations, and you write books that nobody can read.
You know, the real issue is that they're not going to talk to you about it at NYU. Students having to leave the class to go to the bathroom. What kind of problems does that create?
Well, this is one of the things that no professor of education is going to teach you. You might be in the 2nd floor, you have a girlfriend on the 5th floor, she's in a biology class or something like that, and you made an arrangement at 11:15 to meet in some stairway, and you ask the teacher for the pass. Now, the teacher has to determine, now, is he really going to, does he really have a problem with his bladder or his bowels, or is he going to meet Miriam on the 5th floor? You have to sort this out. After a while, you know they have certain routines and habits. These are decisions you have to make.
That's crazy. Now, the other one that always comes up in schools is students always complain about boredom. Poetry is boring.
Yeah.
This is boring.
Yeah.
Well, in truth, some of it is a little bit boring, but what do you do?
That's the teacher's fault.
Yeah.
There's nothing need be boring. Because the teachers always have, English teachers in general, they have a kind of defensive attitude towards literature. I ask you to read a poem, and the kids say, oh, well, he likes this poem, you know, we have to like this poem, and we have to look for the deeper meaning. And I encourage them right from the beginning. I'd say, well, here's the poem, read it. Do we have to? Yeah, you don't have to, just leave it. And they'd read it. And I wouldn't say, no, I wouldn't go into the deeper meaning, which English teachers and professors do. So I said, what happened? What do you mean? I said, you read the poem. Yeah. So what happened? What do you mean? I said, what happened when you read the poem? You know, nothing. Okay, move on.
My guest today is Frank McCourt. We're going to take a real short break and be right back after this.
If you'd like more information about this program or any of the courses we offer at a distance, call us or visit our website. We welcome your comments.
Hi, we're back. I'm Leslie Choyce. My guest today is Frank McCourt. We were talking about his experience in high schools in New York City. Now, it seems to me there's no unhappiness in the world like the unhappiness of a teenage boy or girl, and you must have seen that in the faces standing there at the front of the room. How did you deal with that?
Well, you know, in the 1980s around the USA, there was an epidemic of teenage suicides. It was terrible. I remember over in New Jersey, 4 kids got into a car in the garage and just turned on the gas, you know, and died together. Another case was there was a girl in Houston who committed suicide. Boys will hang themselves. Girls found other ways. But she left a note saying, please please, I am going to die. Please take me back to Georgia and bury me under a tree in our cemetery. I don't want to be in a mall in Houston anymore. So this was all over the country. You'd see this, and sometimes kids would write compositions about their families, and the pointless is some of them. Maybe some of the brighter kids who started reading these nihilistic books would start thinking about suicide and what the meaning of it all. And they say, Mr. McCourt, what's the meaning of it all? Why do we have to live? You know, and then that would drive me back into the storytelling about my miserable childhood and what we had to how we had to prevail in Ireland. And they brightened up over this. But the idea of not having a shower, for instance, they couldn't wrap their minds around that. The idea of using newspapers for toilet paper, and I use very practical stuff like that to convince them that life was worth living. Otherwise, you're going to be using toilet paper, newspaper.
They don't have it so bad. Side trip for a minute to another part of your life. Of course, you taught for 30 years, and then you wrote Angela's Ashes, and it was a huge success, and it changed your life dramatically. I mean, did you know that you had that in you?
No, I didn't. All I had in me was this itch to write this book. That's all. I didn't know or years before, I didn't know if this was the book I wanted to write. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to be a writer. First of all, what I was going to write about, I didn't know. But it was kids then who decided for me what I was going to write about, the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. And I didn't know it would go anywhere. Somebody said, well, that's a nice book. It'll be read by middle-aged Irish Catholic women. And that's it. And I thought, well, that'll be fine. At least I've written the book. At least it gets a catalogue number in the Library of Congress. And maybe I'll be able to go into one of these big bookstores and watch people looking at it at least. But I didn't know it was going to take off.
How did it change your life?
Well, first of all, I didn't have to worry about money anymore. And I became a celebrity. Oh, I seen you on TV. That's the big thing. And then I go on these book tours. And while I was on the book tour for Angela's Ashes, I started writing Tis. That led to another book tour, and then more television appearances. So you become recognizable, and for me that was fine because I spent so many years in the hinterlands of teaching that I began to slowly develop the idea that if I'm going to get this kind of recognition, I can start talking about schools and teachers, particularly the status of teachers in the society.
Yeah, it's a pretty important area there. Now, I noticed the word dogged and doggedness came up several times related to teaching. Tell me about that word in relation to teaching or writing.
I'd like to say that that I was flamboyant and had great flair and so on, but I didn't. As they say, I hung in there, and that's doggedness. There were days I didn't want to get out of the bed to face these kids. I really didn't get into it that much in teaching. There were days of absolute misery, and I went in. I hated them, and they hated me. You know, the chemistry was all wrong. But then something would happen to change the whole mood of a class, and so I hung on, because I think I liked it. As deep down, I liked the activity, because although I wasn't, what would you say, articulating that at the time, it was very dramatic.
Right.
Me and them. This unit of energy, those units of energy, and what goes on. In a way it's a battle, but in other senses a great communion.
I wonder if we could get you to read maybe a really short excerpt from anywhere in the book, right off the top, or wherever you'd like to choose. This is Frank McCourt, Teacher Man, is the story.
A moment. This is about my second day. I think this was the turning point in my... A kid called Joey Santos calls out, "Yo, teach!" You're not to call out, you have to raise your hand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They have a way of saying yeah, yeah that tells you they're barely tolerating you. In the yeah, yeah, they're saying, "Look, we're trying to be patient, man, giving you a break because you're just a new teacher." "Yo, teacher, man." "Call me Mr. McCourt." Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, you Scotch or something? Joy is the mouth. There's one in every class, along with the complainer, the clown, the goody-goody, the beauty queen, the volunteer for everything, the jock, the intellectual, the mama's boy, the mystic, the sissy, the lover, the critic, the jerk, the religious fanatic who sees sin everywhere, the brooding one who sits in the back staring at the desk, the happy one, the saint who finds good in all creatures. It's the job of the mouth to ask questions. No, I'm not Scotch, I'm Irish. Oh yeah, what's Irish? Whatever comes out of Ireland. Oh yeah, like St. Patrick, right? Well, no, not exactly. And this leads to the telling of the story of St. Patrick, which keeps us away from the boring English lesson. Hey, mister, everyone talk English over there in Ireland? What kind of sports you play in Ireland? You all Catholics in Ireland? Don't let them take over the classroom. Stand up to them, show them who's in charge. Be firm or be dead. Tell them, open your notebooks. Time for the spelling list. Ah, teacher, God, man, spelling, do we have to? They pretend to bang their foreheads on desks, bury their faces in folded arms. They beg for the pass. Gotta go, man. We thought you was a nice guy, you know. Yo, teacher, man. It's Joy again. Joy, I told you my name is Mr. McCourt. Yeah. So, like, mister, did you go out with girls in Ireland? No, damn it, sheep. We went out with sheep. So, that's
So
the
you got
frustration. I got into trouble over
In
that,
trouble
too.
again. Yeah.
Kids go home in the afternoon, and the parents say, so how's school? Well, you know, we got this Irish teacher, he has a thing about sheep. So I'm called into the principal's office and reprimanded. We can't have you up there advocating bestiality.
My guest is Frank McCourt. We're going to take another short break and be back right after this.
If you'd like more information about this program or any of the courses we offer at a distance, call us or visit our website. We welcome your comments.
Welcome back to the show. My guest today has been Frank McCourt. Final question here. Any advice for young teachers starting out anywhere in the world?
That's it. That's the question I like. That's the main thing. Because I have it at the end of the book. A young woman asked me, do I have any advice? I didn't like giving advice because I was still learning myself. But the one thing I discovered, you have to love what you do. Find what you love and do it. Because if you don't, you're dead. Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And that, for me, is one of the most significant statements out of American literature. Find what you love and do it. And a teacher can do it in the classroom. I found it through trial and error. I found that if I went back with them to their childhood, this is an English class, go back into Mother Goose and go back into the fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel and so on. They love going back there because they felt comfortable with it. So you bring them slowly through the ages or to other forms of literature. You recite poetry without analyzing it to death. There was a Spanish philosopher once said, before you, Unamuno, he said that before you dissect something, you have to kill it. So I didn't want to do that. And I think then, in the long run, and I did something you're not supposed to do in the American classroom, I enjoyed myself. But the main thing is to look back, with some kind of understanding, and then use them.
My guest today has been Frank McCourt. Frank, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Liz.
And thank you for watching. I'll see you again next time.